Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. Thanks for joining us. I'm Lukman Shadrack, all the way from the Cape Town studios. Trust everyone had a great week so far. As we do on a Thursday, we invite Shaamiela Safodien into studio. She's not in studio this week. She's on our Zoom link up. And tonight we're chatting about defining healing. And I'd like to welcome Sister Shaamiela Safodien. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Thanks for taking the time to link up with us. Now, over the last couple of weeks, we've been discussing so many wonderful things. And this week, we're discussing, defining healing. Now, in previous times, we spoke of health, being healthy and wellness. However, in the last few years, the word healing seems to have presented itself and is how we now speak of all things associated with mental health, more importantly, right? Mental health, and maybe linked to that, maybe trauma as well. Let's begin our conversation, Sister Shaamiela, with why this is so important to have conversations in current times about our healing, about our trauma, about our well-being.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's topical because previously a lot of these conversations were not mainstream conversations that we were having. And so there's a lot out there, I think particularly, I mean, I often refer to social media. And so part of the conversation is really just about, being real about what it actually means to enter into a process of healing. These many cliches that we see out there. I'm embracing the healing process. I'm out here living my best life. I'm doing the work on myself. And I often wonder whether or not we actually really know what that means, what that process involves. And so I thought it would be an interesting conversation to have, just to look at those things more deeply, but also to look at the fact that I think health, wellness, healing, I think it's been romanticized quite a bit in the last while. There seems to be a lot of pressure that people put on themselves to be well, to appear well, to always have their well-being, and I think that's important. Of course it is, and it's wonderful that there's so much out there to support it. But I also want us to remember that this is a very human journey we're on. You're meant to fluctuate. You're not always going to be well. I mean, you can hear I'm nasal. So I'm recovering from a cold this week. And I think, just as I said to you just before we came on, it's about surrendering to that process.
I think it's very important. And often enough, however, and do you find that in this day and age, we tend to be very new age and throw new age terms around, sometimes maybe a little confusing as well.
Absolutely.
Do we need to just bring that back to basics? Do we flow with it? Do we investigate? Maybe talk to us about something like that.
I think it's exactly that. It's connecting to the realness around the process. So I want to share with you what I think is a really great, definition, of healing, and it's a working definition. It's a holistic and transformative process of repair and recovery of the mind, the body, and the spirit. And it's about moving towards positive change, transformation, and finding meaning, right? The idea, and that's in the presence or the absence of dis-ease, right? This human journey is about experiencing difficulties, tests, and again, dis-ease and discomfort. And we can't just sort of like gloss over it, as you say, with these new age terms. And I think be involved in a very surface process. It really doesn't serve us in the long run.
Of course, yeah. Look, healing is not a linear process, right? I mean, maybe unpack that for us a little bit. Maybe our viewers would get a better understanding about that.
Yeah, so it's definitely not linear. And linear meaning that there's a step-by-step process and there's going to be a goal that you're going to reach with particular outcomes, right?
Right.
So unfortunately or fortunately, that's not how the process works. From the psycho-spiritual perspective, and I think a lot from my own experience, Healing tends to be a circular process that's layered and has a vertical quality to it.
Okay.
So in many ways, it means for us to transcend our suffering, and it draws us inward. So when we think about the inward process, it means that any change and any form of healing happens from the inside out, right? That's
Okay.
number one. It's downward, meaning that we've got to, through the process of our healing and through our journey of healing, always be in a process of also grounding ourselves, right? Because the process of healing, unfortunately, is not a very neat process. It's not a process that has boxes that you can place everything in and neatly label them. It can get quite messy, right? So the grounding is rooting ourselves in what it is that we value. Sometimes that even means rooting ourselves into the earth. You know, I'm sure you've heard many times people speak about grounding processes. They're very helpful.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's the fact that we need to be committed to our process in that. So and then it also has an upward process, right?
Okay.
And then I think, again, it has a spiritual quality to it. So meaning that we go inward, right? And we kind of almost excavate these many layers that's associated with whether that's the dis-ease, discomfort, trauma, any kind of struggle that we've been having. And that process, that vertical process, allows us to, as I say, go through those layers, but also to connect to the divine, right?
Absolutely.
So again, this transcendent process that is also involved in our healing.
Are there any myths surrounding healing and wellness? Do we find that, emerging every so now and then?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the big ones is that dis-ease, discomfort, and any form of perceived negative emotion is something to get rid of, and it's something to just cut out of your life, and that once you do that you'll be better, right?
All right.
I mean, most of these things are generally just signals for us to look deeper, and for us to pay attention. So if there's a headache manifesting, right? What's that about? Can I ask questions that are, that's going to give me some self-awareness?
Okay.
Another one is healing is a task that you take on, and that there's an end goal. If anything, healing is really a practice. So there's many practices that you're going to be involved in that's going to help you through this healing process. So you're going to look at that from a physical perspective, from an emotional perspective, from a spiritual perspective.
Gotcha.
And all of those things are going to contribute to, the wellness and the healing.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. That was really, really great advice. Often enough, when you come onto our show, you always come with a bit of a quote and you unpack that quote for us. What do you have for us this week?
I actually have a quote by one of my breathwork teachers, which I love, Dr. Hilaal. And the quote is, healing is an invitation to deepen our intimacy with ourselves, with others, and with life itself. To keep our hearts open with fierce compassion when everything within us wants to shut down. So again, you can tell from that quote that it's a deep process. It isn't linear. It isn't surface. And I think that's a cliche saying that you believe you understand in theory is really not what it's about, right? It's about a deeper process. And like I say, inward, layered, and brings you closer to yourself and others.
Wow. Just today I was having a discussion with our technical guy, our chief technician in Cape Town, Hilaal Barnes, about the Stephen Covey book, because that's what it refers to. Back then, the whole paradigm shift and how we see things. And so amazing, because often enough, we tend to just perceive things a little different than what it actually is. So take a step back, breathe, and analyze.
Absolutely. And reflect, make it a daily practice. It's Muharram, the beginning of a new year for us. And it's a good time for you to perhaps look at, what are the parts of you that's calling to healing.
Absolutely. Sister Shaamiela, thank you so much once again for coming on board. If you want to recap very quickly what we went over today before your time is up, I'd appreciate that.
Sure. So that there are many myths associated with healing. and that I think often we try to get into hacks and to quick fixes, and that isn't. It's a very layered process that is usually quite circular and not linear.
Right. Perfect.
Yeah.
We look forward to next week's edition. Jazakallah so much. All the very best to you and the family. Have a great evening. Assalamu alaikum.
You're welcome. Wa alaikum salam. Take care.
Thanks so much. And that's how we end our session with Sister Shaamiela Safodien. Always comes on board, giving us wonderful advice on how to better our lives. She'll be back next week, every Thursday, as usual. Our program is cut a little short. We cross to our live broadcast in Durban for the Muharram program, and that will happen until the 10th of Muharram, inshallah. From all of us in Cape Town, Sohail Barnes on technical duty, and myself, Luqman Shadrack, have a wonderful evening. Assalamu alaikum.